approach is for you. Not all the practitioners are for you. You have to kind of form your own philosophy. And to do that, you have to educate yourself so that the philosophy you form is based upon the things that are really important to you. And so my recommendation, therefore, is to seek help from a lot of different people. Look at a lot of different lights before you find the light that just fits perfectly for you. And quite frankly, I found that no one knows it all. And I talked about that kind of in the beginning. You know, you form a team around you, and a team that's interested in you, and a team that'll go to the mat for you. Like Taylor had a medical problem, and he told me today, and his doctor was so concerned about him that, you know, that he might have done the wrong thing, that he called him up at 2 a.m. and said, hey, come down here, I want to look at you. You know, so you want to form that group around you that's going to take great care of you. I think it's critical. And then, you know, how do we discern? How do we know that what we're going down this trail, that this guy's got an incredible website with all these incredible facts around there, and it sounds like just so wonderful. Make sure that their stuff is based in science or evidence, okay? Because marketing is a powerful tool, and marketing is not science, all right? It's to get it crawl inside your head and make an impression so that next time you see a certain color, you go a certain way. So be leery of that. And then life is movement, and movement is life, but it's also sensory. So we're going to talk about your sensory system and how the more senses that you can stimulate, the more your body and your mind will remember that moment. So if we think back in all our memories of childhood and so forth, those memories are emblazoned and have become indelible because you stimulated so many senses during that activity or that experience. And think about surfing. How many senses do we stimulate every time we surf? Almost all of them. And we'll talk about maybe some that you don't know about too. And then Bruce Lee, right? How can you not say something about Bruce Lee? He lived what he spoke about to the nth degree. And so he really talks about being like water. Be fluid, be shapeless, be formless. And what that speaks to is stay loose. You know, what Matt talked about during surfing, trying something new. Back off 20%. You know, all this tension, all this aggro stuff that we have in us doesn't always work for us. If you're in a fight, maybe not even then, because you want to stay calm when you're in the most critical moments. Look at any big wave rider, right? The thing that they talk about, you got to stay calm. And how do they do that? They modulate their nervous system through breath. A lot of them do a crazy breath. Like if you look at guys that are going out on the ski after a wave nowadays, they're practicing all these different forms of breath. Gymnastica Naturale is one of the exercise systems that I use. It combines yoga, gymnastics, and jiu-jitsu. And one of the things they talk about most in that is breath with movement and learning to coordinate that movement with your breath. And for me, you know, I've got like 68 coming up this next year, and so all that stuff's critical for me. I don't want to be on a longboard right now. I want to stay on the shortboard. And to do that, I've got to do the very things that I talked about in the beginning. All this stuff is Machiavellian. I learned this stuff so I could use it on myself and then spread it to all the people that I'm closest to. And then we talk about vibrations. Water is very sensitive to vibration. And we're made up of a lot of water. As we age, we lose that water in our system. We dry out as we get older. So hydration becomes even more critical, because hydration not only is great because it helps our cells move stuff through our body, hydration is great because it creates the ability to vibrate. That's how our cells communicate, vibration. Every cell has a different hertz or a different, how many times does it vibrate per minute? Your nerve has a different vibration as your bone, your heart, everything vibrates differently. But the key component here is vibration. And to allow vibration in your body, you've got to hydrate it. Chronic inflammation. This is the one thing every chronic disease known to mankind shares. This one entity, inflammation. Inflammation is also at the forefront of healing, right? I blow out my ankle, what happened? It swells up. Well, the body's been focused on swelling for a while. It figures there's something really important to it. And how many people have iced their injuries in their life? Okay, so there's a book called Iced if you're injured a lot, you might want to read this book. Icing came along in the 1940s. What happened was somebody cut their finger off in an industrial accident. There happened to be a lunchbox there. Back in the day, they kept their stuff cold by putting ice in the lunchbox. They said, throw that finger in the icebox. Let's get to the hospital. And they got to the hospital. It was the first time in history they were able to sew on an appendage and have it actually work. So guess what happened to every injury from there forward? Ice. But there's no physiological studies on it. It just worked for that case, and they said, that's it, we ice everything. Now they go back and they study ice, and what they find out is that this swelling stuff's pretty important. Swelling that stays for months is a bad thing, but swelling that happens after an injury is just nature. What happens when we swell, what happens when we get inflammation, is the body is treating your injury like an infection. Same chemicals, the white blood cells are shipped down there, everything's going down there. Stuff trying to happen, that's why it's swelling up in there. It's for protection as well as for getting a hormone called IGF into the injury. So white blood cells, just like in an infection, head down to that injury. Riding in the saddle of a white blood cell is that hormone. When we ice it, we don't let the horse through. We don't let the IGF in. We don't start healing. So in a sprained ankle that might take 12 weeks to heal, you probably added 2 to 4 weeks on there by icing it initially. So there's a kind of a give and a take here. If I'm a boxer, I'm in a match, boom, I get hit in the face, my ice is swelling up, or my eye is swelling up. Please ice me. I've got 8 more rounds to go, right? If I'm a 10-year-old kid, I break my arm in a Little League game, I've got an hour to get to the hospital, ice that poor kid's arm. But if you're concerned about getting a sports injury better, the first thing you do is not ice anymore, according to the science. And it's been so hard because I iced forever. I'm so broken at my body, I've iced every joint. Now I don't. Now it's analgesics, now it's light compression on there, and we analgesics for the pain, which is what the ice killed. But I'm not trying to necessarily get that swelling out of there right away because it's got the good stuff in there. Okay, so it's kind of an important thing. And so with any injury, with any disease, inflammation is the first thing you must control to get to the second phase of healing, where the body ships down all the important stuff so that you can rebuild. And then from the rebuilding, you go to the third phase, which is remodeling. So you have to understand that there's these 3 phases, and you have to understand, what can I do to help myself get through these 3 phases of healing? Nobody goes from injury to remodeling. Everybody has to go through these phases.
Is arnica good or bad to use that?
Arnica is evidence-based, and it's good. Nature is slow, so it's not going to happen like an Advil. You're not going to rub an Advil into that thing. It's going to take some time. But there's great evidence with camphor, with menthol, with arnica. Those things have been proven to really help the body help itself. Good question. We adapt, okay? Everybody has a timeline. Everybody's life is like this, right? First grade I was killing it, then I broke my ankle, and then I had a tooth abscess, and then I got the flu. And we have this timeline of health in our bodies. And what I wanted to illustrate on this thing is that we're down at the end there, okay? And it's almost evened out with, when you were younger. But to get back to where you felt as a young person and as mobile as you felt as a young person, guess what? It doesn't go a straight line back. You have to relive that stuff. The good news is it goes a lot faster coming back than it did going in. So if I've had a problem 12 years, it's probably going to take me a year to manage that. 12 months, probably going to take about a month to manage that. So this is based on my experience. It's about a 12-to-1 ratio. Okay, I haven't found that in the books. I'm using thousands and thousands of patients as my backup for this formula.
Maybe you need to write it.
What's that?
Maybe you need to write it.
Write it.
Perhaps. Okay, here's a question for you. How many senses do we have? Oh. Okay,
Millions.
who says 6? How many? Or what? Do you know what they are?
Sight, smell, sound, touch. There's another 5th sense that I'm forgetting right now.
Taste.
Taste and proprioception.
Wonderful. Proprioception. What is that? Where's my finger right now? I've got to know that. When you have an injury, if I blew out my shoulder, really have a clue where my finger is, but I don't know exactly. So when you injured, you disconnect from proprioception. When you're injured, it's like having a stroke. And you disconnect from your brain to your nerve to your muscle. And that's why as therapists or when you're rehabilitating, you just sprained your ankle or you're just coming off the crutches, throw the crutches away. I guarantee you 100% of the time, the first place that a patient looks or I look when I blow my ankle out and I'm getting rid of my crutches now, watch me walk.
You look at your foot.
I've had that foot forever. I don't know where the hell it is anymore. You've lost that connection, right? You've lost proprioception. Okay, and then the seventh one, there's 7 now. We're fighting for the 7th one. The 6th one was hard enough to get in there, but the 7th one is called introception. That's that sense that you have about stuff inside yourself. That gut feeling that you have, right? So I tell my patients, take my information through your brain, filter it through your heart, but always go with your gut, even if it's opposite of what I say. Your innate intelligence will always be smarter than me. So 7 senses. That was a thrill for me. That's the first time I presented that. So stimulate your senses, right? With the more you can stimulate, if you can get yourself into a situation where you can stimulate taste, smell, sound, touch, sight, proprioception, interoception, I mean, that's a great concert right there, right?
Seriously.
Okay, and this is a really wonderful point, I think, too, is that you guys have gone to a drugstore before, probably, CVS, Walgreens, something like that. Well, did you know that inside your body you have the capability to make more drugs that's in that pharmacy today? And they got a lot, thousands of drugs in there, right? Well, we have a pharmacy inside our bodies. And there's great ways to access the good drugs and ways to access the stuff that takes us down, okay? So the good stuff, right? So laughing, surfing, relating to people, great relationships, all that stuff that I've written down, and that's all the good stuff for sure. That creates the good mojo. That creates the serotonin, the dopamine, all those great brain chemicals that people are trying to get with drugs. But instead of going out in nature, they take a pill. Does that make them better? I'm going to tell you right now, no. It makes a pharmacy make a lot of money, and drug companies go, but not for us. We're continuing to go down, and what do we do because that antidepressant or something didn't work? We get another one, or we add on top of it. And then you create the spiral. You don't know if your side effects are from your problem or from the drugs, and most likely from the drugs. So the bad ones are mostly created by stress, created by inflammation, chronic inflammation. All that stuff perpetuate the bad chemistry in the body that perpetuates ill health. So really important, nose breathing too. I wanted to talk about that. I'll talk about it a little bit more. But one of the things I wanted to say, I just didn't want to interrupt Mike any more than I already did, is that, do you know how many times you breathe in a day?
No.
Mind-blowing, 23,000 times a day. How many have had a breath lesson in all these years? Well, we didn't need one growing up. From the time we were about 0 to 4, we did pretty well on our own. In fact, if you look at a 4-year-old how they move, they move better than you'll probably ever move as an adult. They're super free. You look at their squat pattern, everything is just perfect. Their alignment is there. And then what happens? Those freaking plastic things happen. Back in the back of the room there, we start sitting, right? We got to age 5, we go to kindergarten, start sitting when we should be moving the whole time, right? So we're destroying our own health from the jump. And we're not really learning a whole bunch at school. We're learning how to take tests at school, but that's another subject. So the goal here is to take all these things, all these 3 things that we talked about, find out where we need some improvement, and then fill it in. And we fill it in. We build ourselves a 24/7 bubble of health. That's our own deal, right? Kind of illustrated by this guy's little chamber. And I was hoping he was doing a figure 4 stretch in there, but I think he's just working on his computer, which is not bad. But everything inside that bubble is for you. It's your nutrition, it's your hydration, it's your breath work, it's your relationships. All the positive stuff that creates all the good chemistry goes inside that bubble. It's not normal, nor is it human to live inside that bubble 24/7. Just not. We need to escape. We need to be a little bit bad every once in a while. And I promote that. But I want you to know is I want you to be conscious of when you open the door to that bubble and you're stepping out. And you know what we call that? We call that a session cost. What is that session of me going to In-N-Out Burgers going to cost me? You know, what is that session where I got to go out, I got to get in a fight, or I got to get all hyped up on the road rage? What is that session going to cost me? All the bad stuff has a session cost. All the good stuff has a session cost. Obviously, we know where we want to be on the balance sheet, right? We want to be putting these things into sessions that are going to make us move forward in our health goals, not backwards in our health goals. Okay. Remember this one? Didn't hit him, right? If you hadn't seen this before. That's Rimana, the ambassador of Chihoku, right? Just nobody finer, great human. But anyway, eat was kind of a metaphor for eating it. And this is just a simple thing. I'm not probably teaching you guys anything here, but food can be your most powerful medicine and your slowest poison. No truer words spoken. You know, so the things that you put in La Boca here, it's really, really critical that you run through that session cost. Am I doing something positive for my insides? Is it easy on my body to process this food? Is this food what I'm eating processable? Right? Or am I eating something that was just like the drug companies made to make money, not made to make you healthy? We have to take that responsibility. If we don't participate in our own responsibility, we're all screwed. And the idea here is that, you know, we create these ideas and we share these ideas and then we reinforce these ideas with action. And this is talking about why we eat these really good foods, okay? So here's a really cool thing. Every year you get a whole new body on the inside. And if you take a second to think about that, holy crap, right? But if you break it down, it's kind of interesting. So how much of you, if I took you and I put you in a blender, and then I took the chemistry out of that blender and I said, I'm going to test that DNA. How much of, what's your name? Teresa, that's in that blender, how much of it is Teresa? How much of it is human DNA? Anybody want to take a stab at this? This is a great party line here. I think I want to give this to you. All of it? 25% is human?
Because so much water. There's so much water that's not really.
Right, but of the chemistry, even let's get rid of the water. Just the chemistry that's left over, you're 10%.
10%.
We're 10% human.
But thanks for believing in me.
That's what friends are for.
So what's all this other stuff, right? It's bacteria, it's virus, and it's fungus. Not to gross you out, but that's really what we're made up of. If we had took a microscope and went along our skin right now, you'd run out of here screaming, pulling your hair out. There's so many aliens on your skin right now, it's ridiculous. Let alone what's happening on your face. There's some ugly creatures up there, trust me. But that's what's in your gut. And that's why it's so important to eat right, because what you're doing is you're feeding these bacteria, virus, fungus. They're all in your intestines, a lot of it. And so when you're eating stuff, either you're eating stuff that promotes that bacteria, there's good bacteria and bad bacteria, and now we just found that there's a line of communication between the gut and the brain, that basically your gut is feeding the brain information on what I'm hungry for, what I want to eat. And oftentimes that information is coming from the bad guys down there. So if you're farting a lot, burping a lot, having a lot of issues on the toilet, you guys got, you got some cowboys and Indians going on down there. There's a fight going on. And you got to look for what's happening, because what is the one thing that's common to all chronic problems?
Inflammation.
Thank you. Inflammation, right? And so you're creating inflammation. When you have bad gut, you got inflammation going on. I don't know about you, but I know 80% of my immune system is right there. And if it's on fire every day, guess what? Your immunity's on fire too. So we've got to find ways to put that fire out. We can do it with good food. Supplementation, I just wanted to talk about briefly. Supplementation is a crapshoot for the most part. You know, take vitamin C, take vitamin E, you know, take fiber. Well, why? Is there evidence behind why I'm suggesting that, or is that just because it's the flavor of the month, my name's on the vitamin bottle, and, you know, everybody else is doing it, so why shouldn't I? Supplements should be given when you've had a blood test, a stool test, a urinalysis, so you know why the hell you're doing it and what the fuck for. It's critical that we take the time to be experts at what our bodies need, and this is one great way that you can quantify that'll allow you to make sure that you're taking in the right stuff. Are you absorbing stuff? I don't know what your heritage is. Perhaps you don't absorb stuff in North America. When you're born in South America, or your heritage is from South America, there has to be tweaks and alterations. And fortunately, through some of this testing, we can get this information out and make sure that you're eating the right stuff. Any questions on that stuff?
Pretty easy through a functional medicine doctor to do that kind of testing.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone's going to take the time, right?
I'm going to ask you about that. So
Sure.
when you talk about testing, obviously for supplementation, what are your thoughts in regards of muscle testing, which is one of my functional doctors, that's what they do.
Muscle test, physically muscle test?
Testing, yeah.
Yeah, that applied kinesiology, is that what you're talking about, or
The
literally
muscle
just
testing
muscle?
basically they verify, is consider any weakness of your muscle relates to your organs.
Right,
And then you base it on that, you have the supplementation that you need.
Right.
Like, I don't believe,
Yeah.
symptom is for everybody. You have to have your supplementation based on your needs.
I think the body knows a lot, and I think our consciousness kind of gets in the way of that. So what I say to that, because I'm an evidence-based guy, and they have studied applied kinesiology, which is how I learned what you're talking about, for many, many years, and have not been able to say, it's going to be the same for you as you. I'm going to test, and the weakness you find is going to be this, and the weakness you find is going to be that. There's no proof that what they've found is right. So what I say is, for the first 10 people, if you were going to practice that way, the first 10 people get the applied kinesiology or the muscle testing. You document what you found. Now we blood test and urinalysis, stool sample, prove it.
So do you
Right.
recommend on top of that do the other?
Oh, absolutely. Until you know that 20 out of 20 are getting the right information. It's really, really important. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, in addition to that, definitely would be.
Because now we're talking quantitative. You've qualified it with the muscle test. Now you've quantified it with the blood test analysis. Because it's reproducible.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay, we talked about water. All right, we're at least 50%. We're 70% or so when we start. I'm probably about, at my age, about 55%. As much as I can hydrate, I'm trying to get it in there, but that's just the way it works. We drought as we get a little bit older. So how much water do we drink? We still really, really don't know. But I think 50% of your body weight in ounces is probably a really good place to start. I use the pee chart. Look at the color of your pee, right? If you're clear or light lemonade, you're on fire, you don't need me, you're doing everything just right. If it starts to get a little yellow, certainly moving towards a darker yellow into the oranges and brown at the end, you're in trouble. Okay, your organs are not functioning properly, you're not digesting food properly, your energy is low, you've got headaches, a lot of bad stuff happens just with hydration. So the very things that we want to supplement for a lot of times are some of the most basic things that we've left out of our healthcare. Okay, and then this is, I'm hoping everybody, in the future, if you would like, I will send this presentation to you so you have some of these little charts that I put in here just for your own edification, so you can get into the rhythm of it if you're not already there with your hydration. Who's heard this? Cymatics. It's a new word. So what they found is, and we talked about this earlier on when I interrupted Mike for the 7th time, science of cymatics is how water is affected by frequency. Okay, so I want you to write that word down if you have a note, and then look it up on your YouTube. And you're going to see some mind-blowing videos, not only of when they apply a frequency like a sound frequency that would come out of here, but also the frequency of mood, attitude, etc. It all affects the shape of water. You're going to be blown away when you look at cymatics for the first time. You're going to want to show everybody. It's insane when someone thinks of a bad thought, how the water changes literal shape. Like, think of snowflakes changing shape. That's what water does. And then you have this room full of laughter. Shape just changes into these beautiful, unbelievable geometric forms. It's incredible. So I wanted to turn you on to this today. It's cymatics. It's really important. And to further carry the lesson, remember, that's how cells communicate through vibration. Like I treat with post-electromagnetic frequency, PEMF, and some of you have maybe heard of that. And what happens is, it treats the body through the frequencies that it's lacking. If I've got a bad disc in my back, I've got a frequency for the disc, and I'm going to send that frequency into the disc so that its cells can vibrate at a frequency that will allow it to heal more effectively. So cymatics is really important, not just cool to look at, but it's what's happening in all our bodies right now as we speak.
So that's why Taylor looks so good.
What's that?
So that's why Taylor looks so good.
That's it. That's it.
Good vibes.
Super good vibes. I mean, when you feel vibes, that's what you're feeling. Is that coming off you? Yeah.
Without going on too much of a tangent, can you speak a little bit to the quality of water and like structured water? versus
Yeah.
chemical water, just
So water that's been oxygenated, you know, they advertise oxygenated water. I still haven't met the water that allows the oxygen to stay in there for longer than a couple seconds when they treat it. So yes, they did put oxygen in there. No, it's not in there probably today, unless they change the technology. Alkaline water to regular pH water. Alkaline water seems to do really well for a lot of people. So if you like to drink alkaline water, I'd say jump into it. I did a test where I did for 2 weeks straight. My wife helped me out. I had a glass of tap water, which was filtered. I had bottled water from, I think it was Rocky Mountain was the name of the company. And then I had a water called Mend water, which is an alkaline water with electrolytes. And I didn't know which glass I was going to. I just thought, well, I'll test this innate stuff I talk about all the time, where your body just knows. And for 2 weeks straight, I went to the alkaline water. I didn't know, but that's what I was doing on a regular basis.
Or attracted to? Or
I went to it, yeah.
You just went to it.
3 glasses, which one do you want? And, you know, shuffled all around,
Right.
this is the one. So, interesting enough for me, that's alkaline water, and so I've been on alkaline water a lot. But I recommend you try that little test and see if that works for you and what kind of water you want to go into.
Can you drink alkaline water all the time? Or can it
Yeah,
mess
well,
up
you
your
want
gut?
to check the pH of that water. You don't want it to be too alkaline, just
Okay.
like in the tap water, you don't want it to be too acid. So, yeah, you find that pH that's perfect for you, like 6.6 or so.
Alex.
Yes, sir.
What's the best type of bottled water for you to drink if you had it?
Definitely, that's a great question. Thanks. Appreciate that, Soren.
There you go.
Man, that's what a case right there. So what you don't want is water that's in plastic. Okay, we already know that we used to get about a credit card a year they could pull out of the body in plastics, and now we know that's every month we get a new credit card inside our bodies, microplastics. In our blood, in our brain, in our urine, it's in everything. So not out of plastic for sure. Glass bottle's the best way to go. So anytime you can find a glass bottle source, that's what I recommend. Okay. And usually the glass bottle people really care about their water more, I've found. The plastic bottle people, it's coming out of the, next to the waterworks down here outside the sewer plant, because there's no regulation for it. So no regulation, and business is a really bad thing for our health, right? Because they're out to make money, not to make you healthy. Okay, we kind of get this one right, okay? And what I want to say about this is there's a formula for this staying in the moment. We are not our minds. Okay, you know that thing that's talking to you up there all the time? You know who you are? That thing's your mind that's talking. You know who you are? You're the one listening. That's who the real you is. You're not your mind. It took me a while to get through that one. So people that, I got 3 kind of patients usually. People that are really stressed, people that are really judgmental or very ego-bound, and people that are like Jerry Lopez, Taylor Knox, they're in the moment. Okay, that's where life is lived. That's where happiness is lived. You can't be happy if you're not in the moment. But you can be stressed if you're in the future. So people or patients of mine that are always type A and in the future don't heal as well as those that are in the moment, right? because being in the future creates stress. Stress creates cortisol release. We're talking about that pharmacy again. And when you release cortisol into the system, you release inflammation. So yes, you can create inflammation just through your brain. Now, you don't have to be injured to do it. You don't have to eat shitty food to do it. So inflammation can come at you from a lot of different angles, a lot of different ways. And then the other person, the ego person, something happened to them in their past and it really affected them. So every day they wake up and it could be beautiful. Sun's out, waves are perfect, everything's great, life is great. But they're always looking through this screen door of their past. Their elementary school teacher told them they never amount to anything, or they're a terrible writer, or whatever it might be. We all have this here, but some people can't open that door, and they stay in that, and they become very judgmental, and they're really judgmental about themselves first and the rest of the world. Good luck with that, right? They're going to chop you down, they're going to judge you, but they're really just hurting on the inside. So when you meet those people, give them a hug, tell them everything's going to be all right. So, happiness. The happiest people that we know about, the happiest country is Finland, most educated country, Finland. Study their education system. We don't have time for that, but the way they educate their kids, you might want to do that at home if you have kids. It's incredible.
They don't give a test to a child until they're 13. That's the first test they'll take in school at 13.
It's insane, yeah. What they do is they let them socialize, right? They let them go out and have fun. Think about that when you're a kid. The last thing you want to do is sit in a darn chair all day long and, finger paint. So yeah, they got it down. And interesting enough, there's a documentary on that. They asked them, my God, you're leading the world in education and happiness. How did you do it? And this head of education over there goes, oh, it's really easy. Went over to America. It's not what they were doing.
The opposite.
Yeah, basically took the few things that America was doing right, got rid of all the testing stuff, and now they've got the smartest group in the world over there, and the most educated people, because they love education. You know why? Because they love what they're learning. They're not forced down this funnel of learning everything about nothing. So the happiest people in the world have this one thing in common. They thrive on something called peak experiences. And a peak experience is an experience that gets all your senses wound into it. And you're so enthralled by that. It could be writing a book. It could be surfing, for us, surfing, right? But in the peak experience moment, that's what they call the flow state. You're so obsessed by the moment, you don't hear anything, you don't see anything, you don't feel anything other than the experience that you're in, and you're in nirvana. It just feels great. And it's different for everybody. But what we want to do is find out what those peak experiences are for you, for you, for you. Different experiences are going to bring you that sense of, I really don't need anything else. I'm here. Everything is just beautiful and great. So peak experiences are what we want to flood our life with. Find out, explore your peak experiences. Find out the things that give you the best mana, the best energy, and live there.
Without psychedelics.
No, I didn't say that.
He did not say that.
Don't put words in my mouth.
That's what works.
Of course, psychedelics. No, there's a lot of great studies on psychedelics and now microdosing, et cetera, that's brain chemistry. That's adding to your own body's pharmacy, in fact, enhancing it. What's that?
It's nutrition.
Can be. I guess that's a different subject. I wanted to put this in there. This is cortisol, not our friend cortisol. This is in the bad chemistry department. This would fit well at CVS. But these are all the things that happen to create a cortisol release. And so, again, any chronic disease has inflammation involved in it. If you want to start inflammation, just invite cortisol into your life, and you will live in inflammation. So it's harder for you to exercise, harder for you to recover, all things bad with cortisol, okay? This fella came over to my house and gave a talk. We had about 100 people over at my house in the backyard, and this guy who was a SEAL, Navy SEAL commander, and he was in there for 20 years or so. And then he decided to go off and go to Harvard and became a PhD in neuroscience, and just an incredible human. Anyways, he told us the story. He said, this is the one thing all operators have in common. We have to have this or we're out. And so, Special Forces, that's pretty aspirational. I'd like to know what that is. And so it's an acronym, and it's EAR. So here's what happens. They get exposed to a situation, right? And in Special Forces, they always go in with a plan, but they never stick with that plan because stuff changes in a heartbeat. So they're exposed to a situation. And in this case, the guy gave a story. In fact, he made everybody shut off their cameras and ran a film of him and a GoPro while he was going through this operation. And he was on top of a place where there was probably 40 insurgents inside this building. All his guys were around him. He went on top of the roof broke, he fell through right into the center of all these insurgents. And so this is where he explained EAR. He goes, you're exposed to a situation and you have to accept it. We've all been in situations at the airport in the last couple of years, right? Where it's like, my flight's delayed and I'm now pissed, or they moved me from my seat, now I'm really pissed. So you're exposed to a situation and you can either accept it or you can fight it. Now he's fallen through this building and he's got people that are shooting at him all around. You can either accept the situation or just get pissed, like, yeah, we built that roof anyways, right? So that's the scenarios that these guys go through on a daily basis. So the point would be, you've got to sometimes accept the situation that you're in to get the best result, especially if you want to build the R, and the R is resilience. And anybody, any great athlete, any great practitioner, any great human has resilience in them because they've faced failure. And when we face failure, that's another way that we can gain a positive. Because one thing I want to share with you is that in life, you can never, ever, 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 ever lose, whether it's a sport, a job, or whatever, unless you lose the lesson. The lesson can be the most important and most valuable thing that you can ever learn in a situation. So you never lose unless you lose a lesson. All right, we've all kind of heard this one before. And the reason that I put it up there, I like Yoda a little bit. It says some pretty good things every once in a while. So when you say, I'm going to try and do something, okay, we almost all say that. And even though I have this knowledge, it still comes out of my mouth every once in a while. I'm able to trap it halfway out. So when you say, I'm going to try and do that on Monday, it goes to this place in your brain. It's called the pre-garbage. Pre-garbage dump right there. But when we say, I'm going to do my best, it goes to the front and center, guilt center. So you've just committed to doing something. I would challenge you to get rid of the word try and replace it with, I'm going to do my best. It'll allow you to say no a lot more often. And that's one thing we can all probably be better at because our plates are so full. We're always saying yes. So that's just a little life skill, that I wanted to share with you there, is that get rid of the word try. And if someone's saying try to you, count it not done. Chances are, and this is where it kind of all started with me, Dr. Brown, I'm going to try and do my exercises. Or I tried to do my exercises. It's like, you're a really sweet person. Out the door. Look, I don't get any results unless people cooperate and participate. I mean, there's no way I can help somebody out unless they're trying to help themselves out. We talked about peak experiences. This is, one example, getting out and watch the Aurora Borealis. This is a little science on the top right there where people bought stuff. Like, I got $1 million, I'm going to go buy a bunch of stuff. Well, happiness is always on the downside with material things. Where we get happiness is through these peak experiences. Okay, so just wanted to, you probably already have that mindset. Maybe I'm just saying it for myself, but it's really important. It's, happiness isn't at the store. And then we'll do, okay, so this is one that's, that I learned from Kobe Bryant, and I didn't learn it till just a few months before he left us, but it's really important. And those of you that treat or train athletes, or that have a vision of you wanting to be great or good, being great's way different than being good. And so being great, and when I train these kids that our aspiration would be the champion surfer in the world, to be great, you gotta be weird. I mean, think of anybody that's great. Think of any great artist, musician, athletes even, you know. They're a little bit off when they're great, right? They're not the person that's probably at the party telling jokes and stuff. You know, they're the one in the closet doing weird stuff a lot of the times because their trip is different than ours. To be great, you've got to be really different, and you've got to commit for life. And working with some of these great athletes has really taught me that. They've got to become a little bit weird in their rhythm and in their things that they do on a regular basis to become as good as them. And one of the great examples was Kobe at this summit that he gave us up at his place called Mama up in Westlake Village. Yeah. So he gave us a little talk before the last Olympics. And we were with the U.S. I was with the performance team. And so he gave this talk, and this gal stood up and she goes, you know, because he talked about being the greatest basketball player ever and what that took. She goes, Kobe, I want to be the best at what I do in the world. I'm really totally committed to it. But I have a really hard time finding that balance between wanting to be the greatest and my relationships, my work, my schooling, all those things that also come in life. And she goes, how did you balance that? And he goes, first of all, may I be candid with you? And so everybody goes, yeah. He goes, get that fucking word out of your vocabulary. Like, get balance out of it. And I'm thinking to myself, I've been teaching balance my whole career. Mm-hmm. And now this guy's going to come in and throw this at me. And he said, there is no balance in greatness. He goes, and the way that I found this out was wanting to not only be the best basketball player that ever lived, but I found out that I wanted to be the best husband that ever lived. I wanted to be the best father that ever lived. And he said, there's no way to do it all. So what he does is he gets up on this balance beam and he falls off into the NBA. 150%. And you've seen him. You've heard him talk. You've seen him play. He is 150% into it. But finally he starts to hear his family over here. And he's going, oh, I want to be the best there too. So he gets back up on the balance beam and he says, he absolutely has to fall into his family at 150% and leave the NBA alone over here. So there is no balance in greatness, was his point. If you want to be the greatest, you have to fully involve yourself. That's why, like when Michael Jordan won the first championships, you know, you see him kissing the trophy. You remember that iconic picture? Well, I met with his trainer, and his trainer said, you know where he was a half an hour later? Working on his three from the left side. He said he sucked during the game, even though they just won the world championship. They're never finished. And that is an athlete that's not only called great, but also called relentless. There's a book called Relentless. It's a small read, get it. It's really fascinating on the division between someone who wants to be good and someone who has greatness. Parasympathetic activation. So nose breathing, we learned, activates the parasympathetic system. We cannot heal unless we're in the parasympathetic. We've got two. We've got sympathetic, means we're fight or flight, right? Everything's hyped up. Or we've got this parasympathetic. Well, we heal, we're in flow state. We do all the good things when we're in parasympathetic. How do we access that? We access it through our vagus nerve. So our vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. Starts in the brain, comes out, divides at the neck, and then comes down either side of our body. It's plugged into the heart, the lungs, all the stuff that's automatic. And what that does is when we're in parasympathetic, everything's working perfectly and really grooving in there. But when we switch over into sympathetic, the heart speeds up. We're less efficient with these organs because we're trying to save our lives, right? It's a dinosaur chasing us. That's where it was installed back in our hardwiring days. So really critical that we understand the vagus nerve. So I want you to write that word down in your notes and look up vagus nerve. And then relate how to access it. You can, as I mentioned, through breath work, through being in good relationships, having a good laugh with people, all those types of things. Doing the hot, cold
Yeah.
contrast, we'll do it as well. Exercising at a high level aerobically, we'll get it out as well. So stimulating the vagus nerve is kind of a lifetime goal. You want to be on full-time stimulation of that vagus nerve to get the most efficiency out of your body. But
Is
nose
this
breathing
coffee?
really does that. I'm sorry?
Coffee's under gallbladder? So are you a proponent?
Everybody's different with your coffee, okay? Some people their system tolerates it beautifully, other people not so much, so just watch your health.
Good point.
Let's see here.
Coming back to breath, when we were talking about function, so if we're getting that descending of the diaphragm and we're not going into the accessory breathing musculature, we're stimulating parasympathetic. If 23,000 times a day we're like this, now we're heightening that sympathetic.
And at the end of the day, this
Yeah.
is you, right?
So the getting that ideal activity, the diaphragm can help regulate the autonomic nervous system, which is sympathetic, parasympathetic balance.
Thank you, absolutely. Any questions on vagus nerve, breath work, and stuff? Okay. All right, question. Anybody want to take a crack at it? It's pretty broad, isn't it?
Sleep.
Moderation, breath.
Sleep,
Water.
breath, what?
Water.
Gonna be me. Yeah, so like people come and see me with all these maladies and so forth, and then I ask them about this stuff, and they're just, it's not their main consideration. It's not a big part of their consideration. And so that's a pretty easy fix if they're willing to participate. And all of us can improve in these things, right? So just these 3 simple things, right? And I talk about quality sleep. You may sleep 8 hours, but what's that quality? Are you in light sleep? Are you in REM, etc.? So I put this up here. Well, I'll go to that slide in a minute. But I've got a little, some really cool charts on sleep so that you can, if you haven't studied sleep, these are 3 charts that will really kind of get you going in the right direction, answer some really cool questions for you about sleep. I got to think about chairs. So almost every athlete that I work with has a problem in their anterior chain, okay? The front of their body is very tight. We call them the mirror muscles because that's what we see. So we tend to, as we grew up and et cetera, we tend to really work these muscles. And then our society shortens these muscles on the regular. And sitting especially shortens these muscles. And one thing I wanted to touch on too about when Mike was talking about the diaphragm, right? Well, guess where the diaphragm attaches to? It attaches to your psoas, your hip flexor. So if psoas is tight, you think that's going to affect my breath? If I'm not breathing right, and I'm breathing up, and I got a tight psoas, that's just a recipe for disaster. So again, a lot of these complex problems are not so complex when you break it down to the most simple terms. And if you've gone through these things and you don't have these problems, then we can look at some other stuff. But most people can be addressed through what they're doing. What does your 24/7 look like? How you sleeping? How you eat? How you doing? How you thinking? Right? Are you in the moment right now? Are you super stressed about something that you can't do anything about? Right? So most people like to forecast that future, and so far I haven't met a clairvoyant that can really tell me about the future. So what are we doing there? We can think about the future, we can plan for the future, but we can't live in the future. It's bad, 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 bad. So death by chair. So within 30 seconds when you sit in a chair, our electricity cuts off below the waist. So again, our bodies run through electricity, cells communicating. Well, they've stopped communicating. The only thing they remember is to be short. And then when you get out of that chair, you're short. By the way, psoas or hip flexor is also attached to all your lumbar vertebrae. So when I'm shortening here and I stand up, this is what I get. I get that shenane. But what happens is now my pelvis, which is supposed to be a bowl, which is filled with my organs and everything else, I've dumped everything out. Now my pelvis is here. I've got stress in my low back before I even go out and surf or do anything athletic. And now I go out and I blow out my back doing something simple, or at my age, reaching around, getting something out of the backseat of the car. But your body was set up for that injury, is my point. And so we can undo these injuries by paying attention to some of these things we're going to talk about in fitness here.
So is it better in your house, just like if you're watching TV or something, just to sit on the floor?
Thank you, that's a great call. And so what I did is I created something called a rogue.
Mhm.
Okay, a rogue is a big rug with a jujitsu mat underneath it. So now what we do, and you can put a beanbag chair, and there's something that your body will mold to instead of you molding to it. But that's where we put our, our biomats and whatnot. We put them right on the floor there. It encourages you to move when you're on the floor, right? You guys have to change positions about every 20 minutes at least every 20 minutes, right? Because your body needs to be comfortable. Well, every time you move, you increase circulation. Awesome. Every time you sit in a chair, you definitely don't. So it's another strategy.
What about an exercise ball?
Great, but change it. Don't just be on the exercise ball either, right? We want to diversify. So a bunch of different kinds of chairs, meditation cushions, meditation benches, all those things that accentuate good analogy, good anatomy, good alignment are things you want in your life.
Yeah, he's killing himself. Just by cheering.
It's a free country. Okay, here's the sleep chart. We don't really need to go over that right now, but I want you to get it so you have
Just a
it.
quick sleep question.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think about in the morning when you wake up? Is there a thing about getting up right away when you wake up or later? Do you know anything?
So you go from short to shorter, and that's no problem.
I think doing those exercises instead of stretching would be better too. More activation.
Like the rotation.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
great
one
call.
plank,
Yeah, good
so
point.
more dynamic activation versus going to the end range and just hanging on your pendants straight out in the morning. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good call, yeah. So movement to create that heat. Okay, the last piece of my work here is just these 5 pillars of fitness and performance. And so, we've all heard about mobility, stability, and strength. Most of us have heard about that paradigm, but I thought it was really missing some links in there. And so what I want to introduce to you is that posture is probably the most important thing in fitness. I think we talked about in surfing how key it is to be in alignment with your surfboard. Well, it's also gross alignment with your whole body. How do your feet line up with the body? Do you stand with your legs straight? Do you stand with weight on your heels? Well, all that affects your posture all the way up and down. So posture is critical to what we call joint centration. That's the goal of everything, is to line up your joints in the center of your body so that muscles aren't all toned on one side and weak on the other, because that will drag your body out of posture and out of alignment. So it's critical to be in alignment not only for just the health of our body parts, but also for function. Alignment and posture gives us the most space. We want space, we want centration. We don't want to be joint on joint or bone on bone, which happens when someone has to get a new knee, a new hip, etc. Because muscles have taken over and created a misalignment of the joint for long enough that the body has seen fit to add more calcium, more bone growth, and more tension into those joints.
When we have that synergy we talked about, you get the joint centration throughout the chain.
Critical. And then breath work. Breath work, we learned a lot about it already today, but we breathe thousands of times every day, and it really sets the stage for our nervous system, our moods, etc. So really important that we take the time to understand breath and know that there are many different types of breath. There's probably, I know of about 40 different types of breath, all for different purposes. Some to calm the body, some to make the body recover, some to amp the body up to get ready for activity. So continue to study breath. Obviously, this isn't a breath seminar. I get deeper into it. But if I can give you a name to look up, there's a guy named Brian McKenzie. You remember him from the first event that we had. He created CrossFit Endurance, and then CrossFit got into all the competitions and stuff, and he didn't want that. He thought technique and doing things properly was more important than how many you can do and how much you can do. So he let them have CrossFit Endurance and really got into studying ultra endurance races. He's done the 100-mile desert runs, all that stuff, but he's taken all his focus and put it into breath work. So he studied breath up at Stanford with the doctors up there and the medical school up there, and have learned some fantastic things. And so there's some great take home. So if you look up Brian McKenzie on the internet and look at nose breath and the articles that they write about it, just some incredible stuff, some incredible learning. And you take 10 or 15 minutes and you've just added to this whole concept of, participating in your own best healthcare. And then mobility. So mobility, here's the good news about mobility, okay? Mobility speaks to joint movement, the ability to have range of motion in your joint. The good news about this, everyone, is that there's only 3 areas in the body that really need to have great mobility. And if these areas have mobility, the rest of your body's awesome. I won't see you. You won't have to come in and spend your time when you could be surfing on my table. So the 3 areas, anybody want to take a crack? Probably already know this. So anyways, let's go. So the 3 areas, sorry about that.
Is that one of them?
Yeah, exactly.
I know you know how to fix me.
Yeah. So the front of your ankle, that's called dorsiflexion. When you flex forward on your ankle, the ability to allow the knee to move towards the foot without lifting the heel up is called dorsiflexion. We should all have about 45 degrees on that. So how do we test that? Real simple. I'll show you with Taylor.
Great.
So what Taylor's going to do is going to face this wall here, and he's going to get about 5 inches away from it. Normal dorsiflexion should allow you about 5 inches away from the wall, and you should still be able to tap that patella right on the wall. Okay, so if you flex forward on one of your legs and you were trying to touch the wall with your knee like this, just don't lift your heel up. So scoot next to the wall there so you can touch it. There you go.
Okay.
Just one knee.
Just one knee. Okay.
So he's just simply flexing forward there. He's about 4 inches right now. So he's pretty good for an old guy. Okay, now he's at 5 inches, so now he's at the norm. So any age, it's about 5 inches. Let's see how far you can go. That's what you want to find out.
Can you increase that over time? I mean,
Yes, but it's really, really difficult. And it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in manual medicine until I met. Would you pull that wood thing out of that case right there? It's kind of a long, it looks like a long boot. Yeah, until I met this thing called a ProFlex. Sure, why not? Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. And this is the only thing, like you can stretch all day long, you can get tissue work all day long, and I've done all that with people. And you barely get any kind of change in there. But I can get a change in one session with this thing. It's an overstretching unit, and what happens is you put your foot in there, your foot goes about to here, and then I let you take the reins, and then you would pull those reins towards you and create a stretch, like a big stretch, okay? It really stretches. And then you resist against that stretch on the way back down. In about 5 minutes, I can probably add an inch to an inch and a half of distance there. And when normal is 5 inches, that's a lot of distance. Now, we did a test on all the pro surfers, and we found that the best one had about 7 inches distance away from them, okay, from the wall. There was a guy, the O'Neill team manager was watching this all happen. He's an old guy, he's always hanging out with us. And Garth Tarlow, I won't mention any names. But anyways, he's like, hey, let me get in there. And he kind of talks like that. He's always got some issues going on. But anyways, he had 3 blown discs in his back. So it's like, dude, all right, if you want to measure this thing, great, but you're done. So Garth, at 50 some years old, still surfs straight up in vertical. It's unbelievable, especially when you look at his history of having a blown out back and being so bad and tight there. Garth Tarlow starts this thing out and goes to 5, and then he moves to 6, and then 7, and then 8. He got 11 inches. And I mean, that's not normal. That's super abnormal. Like, there's a problem with the bones there. But what it proved to me was everything that I had read about the importance of dorsiflexion. This guy is going up vertically and hitting the lip at his age with his body frailty, we'll say. The only thing that allowed him to do that was the ability to dorsiflex like that. It took the stress out of his kinetic chain all the way up. Just mind-blowing. So that really kind of set set in motion my big focus on these 3 areas. It's like, okay, that is for real. Now let's get dorsiflexion. And most people don't have normal dorsiflexion. Super tight in the calves. And the reason is most of us stand for our whole lives. Can I use you for an example? Thank you. Just stand and face the world. Okay. And I'm just going to tap you, and I don't want you to resist me. I want you to just go with it. Okay. So if I pushed you like that, pretty easy to go back. And even though you're not resisting, if I pushed her forward, not happening. Okay. So most of her weight is set up on her ankles and over her heels. That is instantly shortening the back of her calves, right? So Kias, the soleus, the gastrocnemius are all shortening in response to just standing. So when we stand a certain way, we walk a certain way, and when we walk a certain way, we run a certain way. So when you walk, just go ahead and walk towards handsome Soren right over there. So watch her feet. When she walks, she's hitting her heel, which is normal because she started on her heel. And what she's doing, she's pulling herself along. Gravity is hitting her in the head. She's vibrating when she hits the heel, and then she's pulling herself forward. So instead of the body absorbing the shock, the body is inviting shock. So how do we fix that? First of all, we get our weight forward towards our toes when we're standing, and we do that test again. So now a little easier to fall forward, more solid going backwards, just with that simple change. And now when we walk, and this is going to take a little more time than just this short little moment, but when we walk, we're still going to hit the heel. But when we hit the heel, our back foot becomes the engine. So the second toe, the toe next to our big toe, now is our goal to push off from. So when I hit my heel, I'm already pushing. And now, you can hardly hear me walk. But when I walk like normal, everybody hears the clunk, clunk, clunk. And the old story goes, the Native Americans used to really get a kick out of, hearing the cowboys coming from about 2 miles away, because the way they were walking on those big soles of their feet. As you look at how the Native Americans used to track and sneak up on people, man, it was really methodical. It was allowing the foot to roll. And they call that opening the eye to Mother Earth when they walk.
So how much does footwear now plays into this? Like, because obviously, like, what I noticed, most of our shoes are super narrow and like really
Yes.
not letting our feet splay out.
Yeah, absolutely right. So let's see, I'm trying to think of that brand. Is it Vivo? Yeah, Vivo barefoot stuff. They've got a really good concept on. Kind of took the old school Earth shoe that used to be around in the 70s or so and kind of modernized it and so forth. But yes, shoes, terrible. I mean, all you have to do is look at all the bunions that are out there on women from them having to wear the narrow shoes. And then what happens is the edge of the shoe presses against the tendon, and over time that tendon gets choked out and dies. And now the tendon on this side takes over and that toe goes bam. So that's a huge cause for a lot of surgeries, a lot of pain in the ladies' lives just because of the way our society set it up. So yes, footwear is critical. Now we talk about, well, I'll just wear sandals because it'll allow my feet to spread out. No. Happens to be a thing in the foot called the windlass mechanism. Okay, and that's your big toe. So what happens when you wear sandals is you've got to keep that big toe down, keep it from sliding off. Well, what you eliminate is this windlass mechanism that nature gave us. When we put our big toe up, it causes a reflex in the bottom of our foot. It causes the plantar fascia to tent the foot up and to create a better arch, which is a shock absorber. So if we're not accessing that, we're not absorbing shock. The earth wins on that one. Earth 1, 0.
Hey Tim, on that tool that you're using and you're getting dorsiflexion increasing, how quickly does that revert back?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's going to take time and repetition. Again, the body conforms to what you want. Remember, we adapt. And unfortunately, we adapt to the bad things as much as the good things. So now it comes down to reps. How many reps, quality reps, can I get to change that? And I mentioned before, if you had something 12 years, probably going to take about a year. It's the same thing in training. It's going to take some time and some repetition. And the awareness is critical. Yeah. Okay, and then stability, we'll talk about real quick. And stability is literally just the recognition that our brain and our nerve and our muscles have to work together for me to stand like this, for me to have balance. They have to work in concert. And again, when we get injured or we've had bad posture for a long time or had a disease or a sickness, our body loses that, so we need to get it back. That stability is crucial. It's like we had a stroke when we had an injury. It's literally like that. The brain's disconnected from the nerve's disconnected from the muscle. We have to reconnect those things, and that's why you go to the physical therapist, etc., and start with real simple exercises to get that connection back. And then finally, strength. So let's go through these guys here. The upper cross syndrome is something everybody has. Has anybody heard of that, upper cross syndrome? Okay, so this comes from the beginning of the DNS stuff over in Czechoslovakia at the Prague School. A doctor named Vladimir Janda came up with these syndromes, and all of us have them. So when someone comes in to see me, I know you're already jacked. You don't even have to have an injury. You're already coming to me with these imbalances. So we have these imbalances, and then we go, are you right-handed or left-handed? That's another imbalance. So before you're even dealing with the injury, you have to recognize everybody's jacked up and out of balance. And you have to address that along with the injury, or you'll never get 100% better. This is a joint-by-joint approach. This is where we talked about it's the ankle, and then it's the hips that need mobility, and then it's the rib cage and the thoracic spine. Those are the three secret areas there that if you keep them loose, you won't see people like us, not for therapy, which is the idea. I don't want to see my patients. And then this is more information on diaphragmatic breath work. We talked about the nitric oxide there. Study that. That's fun. The Nobel Prize for medicine was won in 1991 by 3 doctors from Europe that discovered what was happening when we nose breathe. They discovered that nitric oxide was mixing with oxygen and doing all these wonderful things for our bodies. So you look at weightlifters, you look at people with high blood pressure. All these people use a lot of nitric oxide to recover. So, and lifters also utilize it a lot before big lifts.
So breathing out as well through the nose?
Yeah, ideally out through the nose, but the technique that if you're going to breathe out through your mouth, touch the top of your tongue to the roof of your mouth as you breathe out. What that does is it creates a dam. So you're not breathing out as fast as you normally would. And when you do that, it creates a back pressure against the throat. And the throat, within the throat are the 2 vagus nerves that come down. So when I put pressure against those vagus nerves, it listens to me and it calms down my body and it puts me into that parasympathetic state. It gives me a better chance of getting in that flow state. Does that make sense? Is that good? Okay, and then a neuromodulator. If you're in pain, you have a +8 pain on a scale of 1 to 10. If you nose breathe for 60 seconds, that'll take it down 2 points. So we call that a neuromodulator. And what you've just done is you've taken yourself from pain is a sympathetic state, and flipped it back into parasympathetic. So it's another great tool to use. And then for core control, right? Breath is core control. So without proper breathing, without breathing down, without filling that diaphragm, you're not able to fill that chamber Mike's been talking about in 360 degrees to protect your body and to be able to move better. The core is there to transfer energy from your lower body to your upper body and from your upper body to your lower body. And I don't know about you, but when I learned about core, this was the core. Now what I know about the core is the core goes 360 degrees around my body and it doesn't stop till it goes below my knees. So the core is made up of anything that's attached to the pelvis and the hips. And that's what we use. And if you look for the definition of core, you really won't find it. There's lots of definitions, and this is the one that comes from the people I respect the most in the business. Okay, the mobility. So mobility is in the joint, flexibility is in the muscle. That's where we differentiate, okay? And then we talked about this is the old picture of the brain to the nerve to the muscle in there. We got to reestablish those connections. And then strength training. This is the final frontier, okay? I get people in all the time, man. They're looking jacked and they're super gnarly and all that good stuff, but they can't move, you know? They can move this way, linear ways, but they can't move like an athlete. And what we're looking for is to make everybody into an athlete. But I want to show you this really wild picture right here. So here's somebody who, his background was at 18 years old. He was the first non-Brazilian to win the gold medal in heavyweight jiu-jitsu. And he's a North Shore guy. And so he kind of helped regulate the North Shore for many years. And this picture will show you why.
I worked him.
So anybody that's been over the North Shore a bunch knows Kyborg and what a beautiful, great human he is. But if you see him paddling up here or yelling at you on the way, obviously you're not going to go. So he's about 300 pounds right there and still ripping, still throwing tail, the whole deal.
How's his flexibility like that?
Well, as a jiu-jitsu guy, it's pretty good, but not good enough. Not good enough. And unfortunately, after this picture, he had a heart attack. I think he was probably, amping it up a little bit, a little beyond what Mother Nature was giving him. But just a great human. And this is a guy, so if you go over to North Shore long enough and you help the local people out long enough, you get to be rewarded with something called a paddle out. And so Kyborg and his buddies will paddle me out at pipe, and Kyborg will get as deep as anybody. And he goes, okay, when I yell, hey, that's your signal, you gotta go. Everybody's gonna look at me, but you gotta go. The only problem is, you gotta go. So, anyways, enough said about that stuff. But anyways, when you load the body, it's critical that you have all those 4 components down in front of it. You have to understand alignment and posture and mobility, and you have to be stable before you try and load the body. Most people get right into a strengthening program, right? If they're not with someone like Jimena, who knows training like the back of her hand, she's not going to put somebody into strength right away. She's going to assess the body, see where they're at, not put somebody on a canned program. So that's a super critical component, is where do you put that strength training in? And you can do strength training with body weight and so forth, and emulate flexibility and mobility with body weight stuff, but don't load it until your body has a strong enough foundation to handle it, or you will continue to break. And the funniest thing I hear all the time is that people will train in this new weightlifting system for 5 to 6 weeks and get blown up, right? And they come in and see me, and it's like, well, I'm on this program, doing this, I've never felt better until I did. And what happens is they can't wait to get back to that program because they felt so good during that 6 to 8 weeks, unbeknownst to them that they were ruining their body and taking it further and further out of alignment, getting less mobility, creating more stress on the joints, right? Because the more flexible you are and the more mobility you have in those 3 joints, the more weight you can tolerate, the more training you can tolerate, the faster you recover. All those things come into play. So that's why those 4 things out in front of strength training are so important. Okay, so we did a little mobility testing. So I just want to show you, probably before it's time to go to lunch, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I just want to show you 2 other things that I do to check. So we did dorsiflexion, and now I'm going to show you how we look at the hips. And those that are on the ground right now, please feel free to follow this, okay? It's going to tell us a big story. So this comes from Gymnastica Natural. This is their ready position. Some people tolerate the foot out. I think it's safer for the knee to pull the foot back under. You guys look incredibly good right now. So how many people can sit straight up without having to gangster? You guys got that? Are you doing a Gymnastica move on me?
Did I do it right?
Watch. Yes, it's my show. So this move right here is going to tell us a whole bunch. So right now everybody's talking, everybody's body is talking to them. Where's your body talking to? Where's it tight?
Your body, like, right here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so tight in the hips, right? So this is what this is all about. So we're testing the hips here. How about anybody else? Anybody else feel tension along the foot?
Yeah.
How about if you turn the foot out? Is that harder on you?
Yeah, then I can't sit.
Yeah, that gets you there. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So these, my point is, your body's going to point out where you need to work. Okay, it's going to point to right here, or right here, or right here. And as a doc, a therapist, what I want to do is I want to get into those areas that you feel right now. Most people that I get give me the gangster lean, right? Because it's too hard to get their body vertical because the hips are too tight. So this is a wonderful way to check out hip mobility, but also a wonderful way to do therapy too. So those of you who are sitting on the ground right now, you can just follow through here. We're going to get about 3 or 4 muscles in a real short period of time. So the first move is just putting your head over that knee. That's a glute stretch. So now you're getting the back of the butt, right? It's a stretch. Okay? Some great mobility out here. Okay? And then come on up. All right? And now what we're going to do is we're going to put a hand on the foot. And this is going to test that anterior chain here. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to lift that pelvis up off the table here. And what happens is you're going to get a lot of fight. Lift your butt up. See my butt's way off the ground there? There you go. Put your hand on your foot back here. What's that? Yeah. That's all right. It's because of the flexibility. It's a lack of mobility in the hips. And this is the story that it teaches us when we put you through these movements in here. Okay, now let's go ahead and we're going to get that, check the quad again. So if your left leg's out in front, it's going to get your right quad on this stretch. So just lean back into it. It's almost like what we call a modified hurdler stretch. You're going to feel that on your quad right there. So it's another great way to get that front opened up. People that have pop-up problems, this is a great stretch for you. Real good. And then one last one we'll do here. This is a spiral. Hand on the opposite knee here. What you're going to do is you're going to follow your hand with your eyes as you lift the hips up. So it's a breath in. As you let it out. And now this is kind of like Taylor's layback cutting. But you get a nice spiral line between your knee and your hand here. And this just really opens up that spiral line that Dr. Rintala was talking about as well. And then, of course, we would switch it and do the other side and so forth. It's really good. And the move that you were looking at was a little more advanced. So what we do is we take from this move, we use breath to hold it in, come on up, put your foot back down behind it, come back down, and here's the core test right here is to bring that foot back and then land it like a helicopter real soft. So that's a little bit more of an advanced move, but it's just taking simple movement that you guys can all do and all capable of doing and putting it into a little routine. So it's just a little simple.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah. So come on up onto the knee. Good. Take a step forward. Good. Push up into the standing. Great. Good. And then slide one knee behind you. And here's the trick. Don't put this foot behind you. Put it just to your side. And then slowly down onto the knee. Good. Nice. And then here's where it comes in, right? So now you got to swing it back and then slowly. It takes a minute. With all these exercises, when you look at any athlete around the world, no matter what sport, athlete, mother, doesn't matter, human, we have to look at these 3 components. And you'll find that most of your health issues, as well as the things that you're really good at, lie within these 3 things. So instead of talking about, the 25 trillion cells that are in the body and how all that works, I've broken it down to a few things. So we're going to take these 3 things.
Modified oblique sit. So this position. This one is nice. Again, it's one of the developmental positions, so it helps us tap into that central nervous system. But here, he's mobilizing that thoracic spine again. He's mobilizing through the hip. He's going to take a breath in. He's going to activate here. Push the knee down. He's pushing this right elbow down, and he's just lifting the hip 2 or 3 inches. As soon as the hip leaves the ground, he's stabilizing through the shoulder girdle, stabilizing through the trunk, and he's activating the hip. This position can be kind of like changing direction here. So you're winding up, active, and then you're opening. So this is helping with that mobility through the hip, but also nice stabilization. Good. And this one again, this hits kind of everything. Good. And The last one I want to show with his range of motion, but he's maintaining this activity and he's breathing. As he's coming forward, he's pushing his ground away. So shoulder girdle stability, trunk stability, he's moving through the hip and moving through the shoulder and moving through the knee. So simple movement, but you gotta breathe and maintain this activation.
What's the inhale and exhale in that?
You could play with the inhale coming down and the exhale coming forward, but you want to have coordination to whatever the movement. You can do both. So the other thing right now, he's thinking about it. He's thinking about this activity and this uprighting, and he's working on feeling it. Eventually, when you get up and you're surfing, you want to be thinking about this stuff. You want it just to happen. If we use these positions and this little sequence to help reinforce this pattern, it becomes subcortical. It's like learning how to tie a shoe. At first, a lot of concentration, you make mistakes, it gets easier. Pretty soon, you're talking to your friends tying your shoe. Again, just like surfing, you kind of flail with it a little bit, well, a lot at first, but it starts to integrate subcortically. Bend your knee and come out to the side a little bit. Good. So, move your elbows forward. Good. So, in this position, one thing with what I teach and how I practice dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, we use the developmental milestone positions. And we use them not only just because the baby did them, but as the central nervous system was developing and the baby was exploring its environment, it found optimal points of support. So at 5 months, you see this position with your infants. And now if we can utilize these positions, we have all this proprioceptive input to express those ideal patterns. So if Taylor lifts his belly, come on in, move away from my hand, and helps facilitates nice shoulder girdle position. So his primary load is on this right hand and the medial side of his knee here. So we're really challenging this oblique chain. In order to get this optimal position, we have that cylinder. And he's able to breathe. He's shaking a little bit, but he's getting there. Push the ground away a little bit more, and now we see this nice positioning here. So this would be your paddling. So we're working stability, he's breathing, but we're also working this optimal position of the hip.
What about the glutes too?
Breath.
And I believe you guys teach the same thing. So rhythm of breath, right, is really important. Like if you're a fighter, your breath is critical, right? If you're breathing out when you get punched, it's over. So in this, it's the same thing, I believe. When you come towards the body, when you're coming back into the body, you're breathing in. When you're moving away from the body, you let the air out. Okay, so that's a really important thing as you exercise and train in the future, is to get that rhythm down so that you're protecting your body. Remember, part of that breath work is to stabilize, and that's what you're doing when you're breathing properly as you move through the body.
So as he's doing this, as he's coming back, he's breathing in, but I want him to think about breathing in here. You'll see people will be here, right? So this is a movement in a way. His arm, his chest, and the thumb's gonna come to the shoulder. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Good. And then back through. And he's gonna reach past his hand. So here again, we're opening up this anterior oblique chain. As he reaches through, we're getting this mobility in the posterior oblique chain. This one targets that upper thoracic area. Hip mobility and thoracic mobility are two key components here.
Which is huge for surfing guys.
Yeah.
Like most people, or most guys that I see, they're in their 50s, they lose it in their thoracic. They can't rotate.
This, yes. So, from here, go ahead and turn back this way. Side to side, as he goes here, we're winding up this oblique chain. So this is again part of this oblique chain and these spiral lines. So if he has the movement and the flexibility, he can go all the way down. But let's say he felt a restriction or pain, he would shorten up that range. So again, when we're going through this later, listen to your own body too. Now, if our reliance on that high threshold compensatory pattern is into the body. Now, if we're really working out hard or paddling hard and we need more oxygen, now these accessory breathing muscles, our upper traps, our pec, our SCM, our scalenes, they will kick in, but we want them to coordinate with the diaphragm to allow full expansion of your thoracic cage here. The diaphragm will drop down, these guys will kick in, we'll have nice stability, and we'll get this nice expansion throughout the whole thoracic cage to get the optimal amount of oxygen to our body. If that's compromised, again, if we're not getting this descending of the diaphragm, our brain's gonna get it some way and it's gonna go more here. So then the thoracic cage, instead of expanding, goes up. And that can play into wear and tear here and wear and tear in through the low back. So we get this hinging motion. So paddling, again, popping up, more hip flexor, and then on the wave, whatever the maneuver may be. So this combination of the coordination of respiration and stabilization is usually where expansion through the entire abdominal wall, through the pelvic floor. When we need stabilization, it's going to go quicker and down more to create more pressure to create that reactive stability. So now if everything's on point, express inborn hardwired movement patterns or motor patterns that allow us to create a nice stable fixed point through our trunk and pelvis. And if we have that ability to express that, then that also affects the transfer of force and load throughout movement in the body. So if we look at 3 months, we see the infant, it's on its belly, it's on its back. With the ability to create that nice fixed point through the trunk and the pelvis, it can lift its head out of the base of support, and it can lift its legs. As that central nervous system matures and we start to express these inborn motor patterns more efficiently, we're able to attain higher, more unstable positions. So we go from on our back, or on our belly, we start to turn, we can crawl, we can kneel, we can squat, stand, and eventually walk. If that motor pattern is expressed efficiently, during development, during these specific developmental milestones, then the other thing that this photo is showing is we have the adult next to the infant. Now as adults, we have different limb lengths, we have different proportions. They all have something in common, and it's the same thing that we have. It is central nervous system. So we are all born with the central nervous system, but when we're first born, it's immature. Functionally and structurally, we are immature as well. And by 3
different ways you have to surf differently, right? So Lora's is a great wave. It's got great shape, but it also can be soft at times. It can be mushy. You can run out of speed pretty easily. So a lot of times with this place, and I've surfed it a lot, is knowing to not go too far down on your bottom turn. And some people like to start a wave right off the bat by just going straight down into a bottom turn. Sometimes that's not the best approach. Sometimes it's better to stay high and kind of do a couple of pumps up high and then drop down once you get out in front of the wave. Because a lot of course health, of course movement, surf technique, and the mind with cueing meditation. So I'll let Tim start off here with a question.
I'm just going to do a little welcome. And I appreciate everybody coming out today and spending the time with us. I've had the honor over the last 40 years or so to work with some of the greatest athletes in the world, but the reality of it is we do things in life from a Machiavellian perspective. We are looking out for ourselves first, like what's in it for me. you know, why did I become a doctor? Why did I get into sports medicine? Well, because I was an athlete that was injured a lot. I was really curious about the body. And I wasn't super confident that all the information I was getting was all there was to have. So I began this quest many, many years ago to learn as much as I could about the body, how it worked, how it repaired itself. And indeed, come to find out the body is a self-healing organism if you give it the proper environment. And so being a fairly high-level athlete, I played professional sports into my 40s, utilizing some of these techniques, but I found that I was still lacking even at the end of my career. And so I finished my career at 42, qualified for the Manhattan Open, that's pro beach volleyball, and ended up getting my butt handed to me by a legend named Karch Karai. And that kind of ended my career, but it started my career on the other end in figuring out, well, what
In life. Love, care, presence, wisdom. They're all the non-linear components. So if we're going to understand, we're going to need a simple way to understand the abstract, non-linear nature of the mind. And